On the iron plains of Korath's forge, two pale suns hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over miles of blackened rock. Here the alien Kreth had built great forges that spewed flame into the air. They did not mine ore or crystal. Instead, they captured the living light of a telepathic race called the Scifi. Each Scifi was chained in a metal frame woven with crackling energy conduits. Their thoughts, hopes, and fears were fed into the Kreth machines to power entire cities. Among these prisoners was Vesa, whose mind glowed like a dim star behind the bars of her cage. Vesa remembered a time before the chains. She once lived in a forest world of soft green leaves and rain-washed air. There, Scifi communities used their gifts to heal forests and speak with animals. Now every thought she shared was torn away by the conduits at her temples. Pain followed, each pulse of energy. Night came without rest, for the chains never slept. But in the darkness of her mind, she carried a spark of hope. Even a single thought of freedom gave her strength to endure another day. High above, in the silent void of space, the human freighter, Astra's Mercy, drifted in orbit around the Forge world. Captain Mara Ellison stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the viewport where the planet's surface writhed with red and orange glow. Behind her, the crew went about routine checks. Engineer Tan adjusted power flows to the drive core. Medic Cho tested emergency medical systems in the infirmary. Pilot Reyes ran course corrections for the next jump. All believed their mission was simple: trade supplies, refuel, and move on. Human law strictly forbade contact with descendants of the Scifi, now considered dangerous and erratic. But in the hum of sensors and the digital tick of scanning arrays, something unusual appeared. A coded distress beacon pulsed faintly on an old frequency. Mara leaned forward as lines of alien script scrolled across her console. It was not Kreth code. It was Scifi. A voice echoed in her mind, soft and trembling. "Help me. I am Vesa." The words were not loud, but they bore the weight of endless suffering. The bridge fell quiet as the crew exchanged uneasy glances. No human ship had ever heard a Scifi plea before. Mara's heart thundered in her chest. She remembered the legends of Scifi compassion and the cruelty of the Kreth. She knew the risks. Human traders faced fines, fleet censure, even the loss of citizenship for minor contact. Defying the Kreth could bring war. Yet the voice in her mind felt like a wounded child calling out in the night. She pressed her palm to the console and whispered, "We will come." Tan looked up, eyes wide. Cho swallowed hard. Only Reyes kept his calm, but his grip on the controls tightened. They all understood. To ignore the plea would be to leave a soul to torment. At that moment, deep in the forge tunnels, Vesa sensed a shift in the psychic currents. For the first time in endless cycles, she perceived another mind reaching out. Not with force or greed, but with hope. The pain in her temples dulled as her focus widened. She poured all her strength into a single thought: "Find me." Her words rippled through the conduits, planting a seed of light that the Kreth machines did not detect. As she sent out her plea, a lone Kreth overseer paused in his patrol, unaware that the tides of fate had begun to turn. Far above the burning world, Captain Mara Ellison ordered the airlock sealed and the descent engines warmed. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every choice that lay before her. Behind her, the low hum of her crew's anxious movements filled the bridge. Tan checked the emergency power lines. Cho loaded medical kits. Reyes plotted a covert landing site near the mining trenches where Vesa was held. None spoke a word, but in their eyes Mara saw the same resolve that burned in her own heart. Together, they would risk everything on a rescue no one else dared attempt. As the Astra's Mercy began its silent fall toward Korath's forge, Vesa felt the first stirrings of hope twist in her chest. Somewhere above, a human ship was coming. She did not know their name or their face. All she knew was that someone out there believed she was more than a power source. She clung to that truth as the world around her trembled with the roar of alien forges. In the heart of darkness, a single promise had been made: And with it, the first light of freedom was born. In the quiet glow of the Astra's Mercy Bridge, Captain Mara Ellison studied the alien script dancing across her main display. Lines of Siri symbols blinked in steady pulses, forming words of desperation. "Help me. I am Vesa," the message read, translated by the ship's adaptive decryptor. Every data packet carried the weight of years spent in pain. Mara's jaw clenched as she read the final line. "They drain my mind. I fade." Human policy was clear: no contact with the Kreth or their prisoners. Yet the sound of that plea echoed in her mind, refusing to be ignored. Law and conscience behind the captain, Engineer Tan glanced over her shoulder. "We could be fined. The fleet might revoke our license," he said quietly. Medic Cho pressed her gloved fingers together. "We could lose our careers." Pilot Reyes leaned back in his chair, dark eyes calm but alert. "We could be branded criminals." Each knew the risk. Under interstellar law, interfering with Kreth operations meant smuggling, piracy, even treason. But as they stood together in the humming control room, another truth shone brighter. Leaving Vesa to suffer felt impossible. Humanity's best stories spoke of rescue, of hope rising in the darkest hour. Gathering the crew, Mara tapped a command, sending a summons to the small conference room. Tan arrived first, wiping grease from his hands. His sister had once been lost to a mining accident. He understood grief and guilt. Next came Cho, whose gentle eyes had calmed countless injured miners, though none as silent and broken as a Siri. Last was Reyes, whose steady hand had guided freighters through asteroid storms. Each held a shadow from their past, but also the spark of compassion. Mara looked at them one by one. "I know what we risk," she said, "but I cannot ignore a life crying out for rescue. Will you stand with me?" Vows in the planning room. The room's hollow table sprang to life, projecting the surface of Korath's forge in red and orange light. Jagged tunnels wound beneath molten rivers. Security outposts dotted the terrain like metal thorns. Mara traced a path with her finger. "Sensors show a power hub here," she explained. "That's where Vesa is held. We'll need to move, fast before the patrol drones spot us." Tan tapped a few commands, highlighting emergency circuits they could hijack. Cho marked safe zones for medical support. Reyes adjusted the drop coordinates, finding a low-traffic sector. As the plan formed, each crew member placed a hand on the table, sealing a silent pact. They would face whatever came to save a stranger's life. Tools of the rescue in the hold. Crates clicked open under harsh lights. Mara handed Tan a set of forged Kreth uniforms, sleek dark armor with built-in sensors. "We'll pass as technicians," she said. Tan nodded, inspecting the energy dampeners woven into the sleeves. Cho assembled med kits and neural inhibitors, drugs that would dull the pain of those freed from psychic chains. Reyes ran his fingers over a modified EMP launcher, small enough to slip into a jacket pocket. "Non-lethal," he confirmed. "Just enough to knock out drones and power nodes." No one spoke of weapons. This was not about violence. It was about cutting the chains that bound a mind. Personal stakes. Later, Mara found Cho alone in the infirmary, checking the injector seals. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Cho paused, eyes on a blood pressure cuff. "I treated a Siri once," she said. She had been freed but lost her memory. She couldn't speak. "I still hear her cries in my dreams." Cho's voice faltered, then steadied. "I have to try." Mara laid a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you." In the shuttle bay, Tan ran diagnostics on the shuttle's thrusters. "My sister's gone," he said without turning. "But maybe I can help someone who still has a life ahead of her." Reyes joined them, slinging his pack over one shoulder. "Let's bring her home," he said. Final preparations. The boarding. Ramp lowered with a hiss. Red emergency lights glowed along the walls. Mara took a last look at her crew. Each face was determined, each heart set on one goal. She checked her own gear, a comm link tuned to a single secure channel, a small energy, blade for emergencies, and a data spike to disable the Kreth security grid. No one would know they were coming until it was too late to stop them. Mara stepped forward. "Ready," she said. Tan, Cho, and Reyes fell in step behind her, their footsteps echoing on the metal ramp. Into the forge, as the shuttle cleared the station and plunged into the orange haze of Korath's forge, Mara felt a thrill of fear and excitement. Below, the forges roared like angry beasts. In the darkness, she pictured Vesa, alone in pain, waiting for rescue. The low hum of the engines became the heartbeat of their mission. They were 4 humans against an empire built on suffering. Yet hope could not be extinguished. Together they would bring light into the Kreth's iron world, and free a mind that still shone like a star. Descending through the copper-tinted clouds of Korath's forge, the shuttle shuddered as it pierced the thick atmosphere. Captain Mara Ellison gripped the arms of her seat, trying to steady her nerves. Beside her, Pilot Reyes worked the controls with calm precision. The shuttle's thrusters flared, guiding them toward their covert landing zone, a plateau of black slag just outside the main extraction tunnels. When the ramp hissed open, a blast of cold, metal-scented air swept over the team. Tan and Cho stepped out first, their forged Kreth uniforms obscuring human shapes beneath alien armor. Mara followed, her heart pounding like a drum. Behind her, Reyes retracted the ramp and sealed off the shuttle. Nearly invisible in the dim red light, they melted into the rocky terrain. Mara activated her helmet's low-light visor. The landscape looked like a war zone frozen in time. Twisted pipes snaked along the ground. Smoke rose from vents carved into the plain. In the distance, tall towers glowed with molten energy. The hum of machines filled the air, punctuated by distant clangs and heavy footsteps. Somewhere below, the Sari prisoners waited. The team stayed low, moving from rock to rock. Tan carried a small data spike. Cho clutched a med kit and a slender vial of neural sedative. Reyes scanned the skies for patrol drones. Each drone was a sleek, silent orb that hovered on magnetic fields. A single pulse from its scanner could expose them. With practiced patience, Reyes signaled the team to halt. Above them, a drone drifted into view. Its lens glowed a cold blue. Reyes pointed, and Tan pressed a button on his wrist pad. A soft pulse of EMP energy rippled from the pad, strong enough to disable the drone for minutes. The orb flickered and fell, tumbling to the ground in a burst of sparks. The team slipped past as the drone's emergency beacon glowed and died. They crept toward the tunnel entrance, a yawning maw carved into the basalt. Heavy doors stood partially open, metal frames bristling with energy coils. Mara tapped her data spike against the lock. The panel's lights blinked red, then green. Inside, a narrow corridor stretched ahead, lit by flickering orange strips as they stepped in. Mara could feel the weight of alien eyes around them. Security cameras dotted the ceiling like insect eyes. Tan paused at a junction and reached up to remove a small sensor unit. He tucked it into his belt with a soft click. "One less eye," he whispered. They moved into a larger chamber. Here, the walls pulsed with living conduits, thick cables that fed directly into rows of shimmering cages. The cages glowed with pale, wavering light. Within each, a Siri sat. In silence, their heads bowed and eyes closed. The slender figures glowed as if lit from within. Their pale skin showed the faint tracings of energy lines that led into the Kreth machines. Mara's breath caught. Across the room, she saw Vesa. Even through her uniform, Vesa glowed with soft silver light. Her face was calm, as if she dreamed of a world far away. Tiny sparks of energy flickered along the conduits at her temples. Each flicker sent a twinge of pain that Mara felt in her own chest. Cho lifted the neural sedative vial. She held it steady, though her fingers trembled. "She looks so fragile," Cho murmured. "We have to be quick," Mara nodded. "We will be." She gestured toward a side passage. "Follow me. We need to reach her cage from the back." They edged along the wall, tapping circuits and cutting power lines. The hum of the main conduits softened as sections went dark. Tan worked quickly, flipping switches to reroute energy. Cho scanned the corridor behind them, ready to treat any injured. Rhea stood guard at the chamber's entrance, rifle held low but ready. Suddenly, red lights flashed along the corridor ahead. An alarm klaxon sounded, a harsh, wailing cry that shook the metal walls. Mara's heart thundered. They must have found the disabled drone, she said. Patrols are coming. Footsteps thundered in the tunnel beyond. Through a narrow aperture, she could see Kreth enforcers approaching, their heavy boots kicking up dust. Metal armor gleamed in the low light. Their energy weapons were slung at their sides, silent but deadly. Mara pressed a finger to her lips. Positions. In a single fluid motion, the team took cover. Tan pressed his back to a conduit ready to jam sensors. Cho leaned behind a power junction, vial poised. Mara slipped into the shadows behind Vessa's cage, data spike in hand. Rhea stood behind the main door, watching for more guards. The first Kreth enforcer stormed into the chamber. He froze at the sight of so many prisoners. His chest plate rattled as he called out orders. A second enforcer followed, scanning the room. Reyes triggered a silent stun grenade, sending out a gentle pulse that knocked the guards unconscious without harm. They collapsed in padded silence. Mara slid forward and placed the data spike on Vessa's cage panel. Sparks flew as the locks disengaged. The door swung open. Vessa's eyes fluttered. For a moment she looked confused, as if waking from a long dream. Mara spoke softly. Vessa, I'm Mara. We're here to help. Vessa's glowing eyes met Mara's visor. She blinked once, then reached out a trembling hand. Mara grasped it, her gauntleted fingers warm. A spark of psychic light passed between them, an unspoken bond of trust. But the alarm had not stopped. More footsteps echoed. The rescue was not over. Mara lifted Vessa into her arms. Cho dashed forward with a portable shield to block incoming fire. Tan yanked open a maintenance hatch in the floor. This way, he shouted. Mara slipped through the hatch into darkness, Vessa in her arms. Cho and Reyes followed. The hatch slammed shut above them, sealing out the alarm lights. In the deep hush of the crawl space, Mara let out a shaky breath. Vessa huddled against her, weak but alive. Above them, the forge world trembled. The first barrier had been broken, but many more lay ahead. Under alien skies, the small team pressed onward, 4 humans and 1 rescued soul, ready to brave the tunnels that would lead them to freedom. Beneath the forge's scarred surface, the narrow crawlspace sloped downward into winding tunnels. Captain Mara Ellison led the way, her heart pounding with every step. Vessa clung to her side, pale light glowing through her frail form. The rescued Ciri's breath came in shallow whispers, each one a triumph over the pain she had endured. Behind them, Engineer Tan swept the hatch closed, sealing out pursuers for the moment. Medic Cho pressed a small med injector to Vessa's arm, delivering a slow-release sedative that would ease the tremors in her temples. The tunnel walls were carved from cooled slag, black and glassy. Strange veins of mineral ran like rivers through the stone, pulsing with faint warmth underfoot. Reyes moved next to Mara, rifle raised but barrel pointed down. The path twisted and forked. Small red lights on his helmet guided their way. Each turn led them farther from the cages and deeper into the unknown of the Kreth stronghold. Behind them, distant alarms still echoed, but the thick rock swallowed the sound. Mara paused at a junction. We need to cross the main conduit, she whispered. It's the fastest route to the service elevators. Tan knelt beside a low junction box. His fingers moved swiftly, rerouting power and opening a narrow maintenance doorway. A soft hiss followed as the hidden door slid open. Beyond lay a corridor lit by flickering amber bulbs. Sparks rained down from overhead lines, but the path was clear. Mara helped Vessa to her feet. Together they stepped into the new passage. The corridor ended at a vast chamber filled with humming energy tubes. Massive cables arched overhead, sending pulses of bright light through transparent coils. The vibration of raw power thrummed in their bones. Here the Ciri's stolen energy was collected and directed into the forge's engines. Mara's jaw tightened. Every breath in this Place came at the cost of Vessa's suffering. She motioned for silence. Tan took the lead, slipping his EMP launcher from beneath his coat. "One shot," he said quietly. "It'll knock out these tubes for a minute, maybe two." Cho helped Vessa to sit against the cool wall, wrapping a soft cloth around her wrists to ease the pain of residual shocks. "Stay close," Mara told her team. Tan knelt beside a thick conduit. With a precise aim, he fired. A pulse of electromagnetic energy rippled outward, and the chamber's lights dimmed. The hum of power slowed to a whisper. Sparks sputtered and died along the tubes. The heavy doors at the far end of the chamber slid open in response to the power shift, just long enough for the team to slip through. They entered a narrow service shaft where a large elevator car sat empty. Control panels glowed red with emergency power. Reyes scanned for guards. "No sign," he reported. Mara tapped the panel with the data spike Tan had given her. The elevator shuddered and descended with a mechanical groan. Vessa leaned against Mara as the car moved deeper, the walls vibrating lightly. Below, the sound of distant machinery and hushed Kreth voices drifted through the gaps in the shaft. Suddenly, the elevator jolted to a halt. The lights flickered. A voice boomed over the intercom in the Kreth language. Mara's finger shot to her earpiece mic. "We have company," she whispered. "Brace yourselves." The doors slid open, to reveal a squad of Kreth enforcers, their weapons drawn. Tan's hand flew to the launcher, but then he made a decision. He pressed his palm to the elevator's control panel, locking the doors once more. Sparks sprayed from the panel. Tan winced but held firm. "Go!" he shouted. Mara scooped up Vessa as Reyes covered her, dragging her toward the still-closing doors. Cho darted after them with a medical pack. The hatch sealed with a final clang. For a moment, they were plunged into darkness, then emergency lights bathed the elevator in red. The car lurched upward, carrying them away from Tan's sacrifice. Through the metal wall, Mara felt a dull tremor, a sound of something heavy collapsing behind them. She pressed a hand to her ear, hearing Tan's voice crackle through. "Go! Free her!" In the cramped space, Vessa clutched Mara's shoulder. Mara met her glowing eyes and nodded. "He saved us," Mara said, voice thick with gratitude. Vessa's pale light pulsed brighter for a heartbeat, a silent salute to the man who stayed behind. The elevator climbed. Outside, the forge world raged on, but within that steel car a spark had been lit. The series' first taste of freedom burned bright in Vessa's mind. She no longer stood alone. They would carry Tan's sacrifice with them, and together, human. An alien would challenge the might of the Kreth. The service elevator's doors slid open onto a low, wide maintenance level. Dim amber lights revealed thick pipes along the walls and a grated floor that rattled underfoot. Captain Mara Ellison steadied Vessa in her arms as Medic Cho led the way to the far end of the corridor. The rescued series' pale light pulsed, softly, a sign of her growing strength. Pilot Reyes scanned the corridor with a small handheld sensor. "Shuttle bay is 2 turns down, then up a flight of stairs," he whispered. The walls of the tunnel curved, forcing them to follow a winding path. Each step echoed in the still air. Behind them, the hum of the forge world had faded to a distant roar. They came to a junction where a pair of heavy doors marked hangar access. Mara pressed her palm against the left door's sensor pad. The lights flickered green, and the doors slid open. Beyond lay the Astra's Mercy scout shuttle, half hidden behind maintenance crates and spare thruster parts. Its white hull was streaked with red dust from the forge world's atmosphere. Reyes darted forward to inspect the walkway. "We have 2 armored guards and a patrol drone in the bay," he reported. He tapped his comlink. "I can take the drone quietly. Mara, you get Vessa aboard. Cho, be ready for anything." Tan still traveled with them, moving last. His face pale, but his spirit strong. Reyes crept to a side panel and pressed a button. A soft pulse radiated from his handheld EMP emitter. The drone's light winked out and it fell from its mooring, clattering onto the floor. Reyes smiled. One less obstacle. Mara carried Vessa toward the open shuttle door. The Sari's breath was steady now, and her cheeks glowed gently. Cho followed, clutching a med pack, Inside the shuttle, Reyes reached up and sealed the outer bay doors. Then he dropped the ramp with a soft hiss. But the two Kreth guards had turned at the sound. They spotted the humans and raised their stun staves. Tan sprang forward, placing himself between the guards and his friends. He raised the EMP emitter again and sent another pulse. The staves went dark as the guards' helmets flickered and died. The two Kreth folded to the floor in deep sleep. Mara stepped inside and eased Vesa onto the shuttle's bench seat. Cho knelt beside her, checking her pulse and tightening her wrist wraps. Vesa's light brightened when Mara stroked her hair. "You are safe now," Mara whispered. Reyes closed the hatch and crossed to the cockpit. He flipped switches and brought the shuttle systems online. Outside, the wide bay doors began to slide open. Mara moved beside the pilot, staring out at the Forge world's sky, a seething sky of copper clouds and glowing embers. Reyes thumbed the thruster controls. "Hold on," he warned. The shuttle surged forward. The ramp retracted, and the shuttle backed out of the bay, stirring up dust that glowed in the bay lights. Charge plates clanged beneath the craft. The open bay doors let in a hot breeze, carrying the hiss of distant vents. The shuttle cleared the hangar and dropped into the red haze of Korath's forge. Mara guided Vesa to the small side window. Vesa's wide eyes drank in the view, the endless sea of black rock etched with rivers of fire. A small smile curved her lips. For the first time, she breathed fresh air that came from a living world. Reyes banked the shuttle toward the Astra's Mercy, orbiting the Forge world on a collision course with the freighter. "We'll need to avoid the Kreth patrol cruiser," he said, pointing to a bright silhouette moving against the copper sky. The cruiser's length was vast, like a metal leviathan glinting in the light of the Forge. Mara tapped her comlink to the freighter. "Astra's Mercy, this is rescue. Team, we need a safe corridor for pickup." She held her breath. Moments later, the freighter's response crackled. "We're opening the inner hatch. Jump in, hurry." Relief bloomed in her chest. Reyes dove toward the freighter's belly. The cruiser crept closer, its sensors probing for escapees. Mara clutched Vesa's hand. Cho readied a small deflector emitter, a device that would mask their heat signature for precious seconds. Tan watched the cruiser's silhouette grow larger on the forward screen. 3, 2, 1. Reyes counted. Down. At his signal, Cho activated the emitter and Mara hit the shuttle's main thrusters. They shot upward in a bright flare. The cruiser's sensors flickered as the shuttle vanished from its scope. Inside the freighter's hangar, a ramp descended. The shuttle's landing gear ground against the deck with a hollow thump. Mara ran forward carrying Vesa as Cho and Tan helped Reyes clear the cockpit. The ramp closed behind them. The shuttle hummed softly, empty at last. Lights on the hangar walls brightened. Crew members hurried forward, faces flushed with relief. Captain Ellison, already on the platform, embraced Vesa gently. "You're safe," she said. "Welcome home." Vesa's light grew steady and calm. She lifted her hand and pressed it to Mara's cheek. In that moment, the bond between human and Siri became something more than rescue. It became a promise. A promise that no one would ever again treat a living mind as a tool. Above them, the Forge world's fire burned on. But here, aboard the Astra's Mercy, hope had carved a safe haven. As the freighter drifted away from the Forge world, Vesa stood tall among her human friends. Across the void of space, a new chapter of freedom had begun. Captain Mara Ellison entered the infirmary where soft white lights glowed over rows of beds. Vesa lay on the central biobed, her pale skin threaded with healing lines of energy. Medic Cho hovered at her side, adjusting the flow of a gentle sedative that eased the Siri's pain. Mara stepped quietly into the room, the door hissing closed behind her. She watched Vesa's chest rise and fall in a calm rhythm for the first time since the rescue. "You are safe here," Mara whispered. Vesa's eyes fluttered open. She smiled weakly and reached out a hand. Mara took it and squeezed, gently. Cho straightened and offered a calm nod. "Her strength returns," she said. "The sedative helps, but she needs rest." Mara turned to the medic. "Thank you," she replied. Cho gave a small bow and left to check on the other injured crew members. Mara stayed at the bedside looking at Vessa's glowing form. Outside the infirmary window, the Forge World's fires burned far below. But here in the freighter, life felt quiet and safe. Later that morning, Mara led Vessa to the ship's observation deck. A large viewport looked out at the crimson haze of Korath's forge. The distant world spun slowly, a swirl of smoke and ember. Vessa pressed her hand to the glass. "I never thought I'd see sky again," she said softly. Mara stood beside her, her uniform crisp and neat. "You will see many skies now," she promised. Vessa turned to her and placed a glowing fingertip on Mara's chest. A spark of warmth passed between them, a pact of trust that bridged two very different lives. Below deck, a comm signal beeped urgently in the briefing room. Mara and her senior officers gathered around a holotable. An image of a Kreth cruiser and a human freighter hung in the air. A stern voice crackled over the line. "This is Envoy Zorth of the Kreth High Command. You have 1 hour to return. The Siri vagrant known as Vessa. Failure to comply will result in immediate blockade and seizure of all human vessels in this sector." The holo faded, leaving red warning icons blinking. Engineer Tan slammed his fist on the table. "They think they can scare us," he growled. Cho placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "We must choose wisely," she said. Mara studied the table. The blockade would strand hundreds of civilian ships. Supplies of food, fuel, and medicine would run low. Yet handing Vessa back meant condemning her to slavery and death. "We do not abandon the innocent," Mara declared. Her voice was firm. Reyes nodded. "We stand with you, Captain." Cho and Tan echoed their agreement. The crew's loyalty gave Mara strength. She tapped a command on the holo panel. "Prepare a response. We refuse to return Vessa. We will not hand her over." In the docking bay, lights shifted from white to red as the freighter's announcement echoed through the corridors. Human. Sailors paused in their tasks. Vessa watched from the observation deck, her pale glow steady. "What will they do?" she asked Mara later that evening. They sat in the small common area, sharing a simple meal of bread and fruit. Vessa had tasted real food for the first time in years. "They will be angry," Mara replied, "but we have to do what is right." Vessa nodded. "I owe you my life," she said. "I will stand with you." That night, alarm klaxons suddenly rang through the deck. Kreth boarding shuttles approached the freighter's hull like dark beetles against the stars. Soldiers in heavy armor stood at the airlock, their energy rifles at the ready. Envoy Zorth himself led them, his tall form rigid under a plasma helm. "Open the doors," his translator intoned. "We have come for the Seri vagrant." Mara stepped forward on the other side of the bulkhead. "You will not have her," she said. Her voice did not tremble. Envoy Zorth's eyes glowed through his helm. "Then you force our hand," he said. He raised a gauntleted hand, and behind him troops advanced. Mara's crew formed a line beside her. Tan hefted an EMP launcher. Cho held a deflector shield. Reyes gripped his rifle but did not point it. Vessa rose slowly from behind Mara, her ghostly light filling the bay. She held out her hands. "Please," she said, her voice echoing in all minds present. "I choose life." The standoff held for a heartbeat. The flames of Korath's forge reflected in every visor. Then Mara whispered, "Stand strong." In that silence, the choice was clear: freedom over fear, hope over tyranny. Beneath the glare of red warning lights, Envoy Zorth's armored troops held their ground at the airlock. Captain Mara Ellison stood firm beside her crew, rifles lowered, but ready. Vessa floated before them, her pale light steady and calm. In that moment, silence stretched across the two sides like a taut wire. Vessa raised a slender hand, fingers splayed. Across the hangar bay, every mind within range felt a gentle pulse of thought. It was not a blast or a shout, but a soft whisper that filled the air. Images of Seri lives torn apart, cages of crackling energy, the quiet gardens and singing forests of her home world. The vision was clear and kind. There was no hatred in it, only the longing for life and freedom. The Kreth soldiers staggered. Their rifles clattered as their arms shook. Murmurs rose in their ranks. Envoy Zorth himself lifted a gauntleted hand to his helm, as if to block out the sudden surge of feeling. His posture wavered. No one spoke a word, but every heart in that bay understood the truth of Vessa's plea. Behind Zorth, the soldiers began lowering their weapons. One by one they blinked back confusion and relief. A young Kreth guard, his armor scuffed and his brow furrowed, reached out to steady himself against the bulkhead. He turned to his comrade and said something in the Kreth tongue, a question, an apology, perhaps an admission of doubt. His friend shook his head, then tucked his rifle away. Soon, all the soldiers slung their weapons aside. Envoy Zorth took a hesitant step forward, his voice cracking through the translator. "Your mind, it shows us who we are," he said. "We see our wrongs." His gauntlet dropped to his side. "I withdraw my demand. We will leave this ship." The envoys behind him bowed their plated heads in acceptance. Mara exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. The airlock door opened with a soft whoosh. Zorth and his troops filed out in orderly rows, their boots echoing on the metal floor. Through the open door, the stars shone bright against the void. Mara watched until they were gone, then turned to her crew, whose faces glowed with relief and awe. Cho stepped forward and helped Vessa steady herself. Tan and Reyes exchanged wide grins. In the days that followed, the Astra's Mercy hosted tense but hopeful negotiations between human diplomats and Kreth delegates. Vessa spoke at each meeting, translating her own story into words of compassion. She described how the Seri once lived in harmony with all life. She spoke of pain and of hope reborn. Slowly, the Kreth listened. They revised old decrees and signed a treaty that granted asylum to all Seri who wished to leave the Forge world. When the negotiations ended, Captain Ellison stood on the observation deck beside Vessa. Beneath them, Korath's forge glowed with renewed purpose. The Kreth had begun to dismantle the extraction facilities. Freed Seri returned to starships or settled on new worlds. Vessa placed her hand on Mara's shoulder. "You gave me life twice," she said, her voice soft with gratitude. "Once by rescuing me, and once by giving me a voice."